and darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing Thor Ragnarok Prelude. This is a collection of 6 comics that are setting up for Thor Ragnarok and refreshing our memories slash introducing some of us to new characters, I guess. It basically focuses on the Hulk and Thor. So the first 2 comics in here are a comic adaptation of the Incredible Hulk movie. Then the next 2 are an adaptation of Thor the Dark World. There is also Thor 361, which is an old Thor comic, which has Hela in it, and the Land of the Dead. And then we have Incredible Hulk 95, which is the 4th Planet Hulk comic. So we get to see the Hulk on Sakaar, which is part of that movie. So the actual adaptation of the Prelude comics are by Will Corona Pilgrim, J.L. Giles, and J. David Ramos. The entire list of writers and artists for all of these comics will be in the description below. So this Prelude, this trade, is basically 4 different comics, and they each have their own different feel and vibe to them, so it's hard to review this on the whole. I ended up giving it 3 stars, because the whole Prelude is kind of just meh, honestly. The comic adaptations of The Incredible Hulk and The Dark World aren't anything new. You could just watch the movies and actually get more out of that. So if you are not a hardcore have to have all the comics fan, you could totally just skip this and rewatch the movies instead and be set to watch Thor. In fact, I don't even think you need to watch The Incredible Hulk to watch Thor Ragnarok. I think Avengers Age of Ultron would have been more useful, but they might have done that for a different one. I haven't actually read any of the other preludes. This is the first time I tried it, and I'm not impressed, basically. So the Incredible Hulk movie is basically setting up Bruce Banner and introducing how he got his powers and how he turns into the Hulk. So we get this background on the gamma radiation and what experiments he was actually doing, and the villain in this comic is basically the US government trying to track him down. So Bruce is on the run, trying to avoid the government who wants to recapture him and study him for science, and they think that he is government property because he is the result of this experiments. Kind of a similar vibe to Captain America happening in here. I haven't seen this movie in several years, so this comic storyline was actually the most interesting part of this book for me. Not because I loved that movie terribly, but because it felt new. Because it had been so long that I didn't remember what was happening, so this comic storyline felt like a brand new thing. I only vaguely remembered the plot and what was going to happen, and I loved the introduction of these characters, and I had seen the movie, so I still had like an emotional connection to like his girlfriend, but like didn't fully remember what was going to happen with that, so was still surprised a little bit when that stuff happened. There's the Hulk fighting the government for you guys. Yeah. I like Bruce Banner as a character and his emotional journey, like this pull he has to try to resist turning into the Hulk, but at the same time, I feel like the Hulk is his own identity, and I feel for the Hulk also. So I liked these comics. So this particular one, probably a 4 stars, just because I was surprised by it. There's nothing in here that I was disappointed by, unlike the other comics. So Preludes 3 and 4 follow Thor the Dark World, which is one of my favorite MCU movies, and I actually just rewatched it before going to see Ragnarok. So, going into this comic, nothing surprised me because I knew what was going to happen. And I have seen it so many times because it's one of my favorites that I can basically just quote it off the top of my head. So the comics were actually incredibly disappointing to me because I had such high expectations because I love that movie so much. So in Thor the Dark World, we have this mysterious ether that is basically got its own power and mind and thing going about it. And there are these creatures called the Dark Elves who existed a really long time ago, and they want to come out of hibernation, basically, to use the ether to take over all 9 worlds, and Thor, Odin, and the rest of the Asgardians need to stop it. Also, we get to see Jane Foster and Eric Selvig as they are investigating this thing called the Convergence, where all the 9 worlds line up, which is how the Dark Elves are going to take over all the worlds at once. And obviously Loki's involved in this. Loki actually spends a good part of his time in jail in here. Pretty sad. So the thing about these comics is that they take scenes straight out of the movies, and some of the scenes work really well on the screen and don't adapt well to the comics. So a lot of like Loki's lines, like, "If I am for the axe, for mercy's sakes, just swing it." It's not that I don't love our little talks, it's just I don't love them. It works really well in the scene, like in the movie. The way that Tom Hiddleston delivers that line is awesome, but it falls flat in the comics. It doesn't quite work as well. And especially Prelude 3 seems to be just jamming as many scenes from the movie as possible into the comic without regard to whether or not it's working as a comic. And 3, just the pacing is off, there's too much stuff happening, we're just jumping from scene to scene. Some of them I felt like we needed to expand more, some felt like we didn't need that scene, or we could have cut a panel out here or there. So 3 is kind of a mess, and didn't actually enjoy it. It felt rushed, and honestly, I'd rather just watch the movie. Prelude 4 is like the main final battle thing that is happening in the Dark World. This one is a lot better paced off. I enjoyed it a lot more. It has this really awesome double page spread, which I adore happening in it. I enjoyed Prelude 4 a lot more, but still not as much as reading the Incredible Hulk ones, where I didn't know what was going to happen because I hadn't seen them forever. So my recommendation for reading these comics is not to watch these movies immediately before reading these comics. And actually, the less you remember about the movies, probably the more enjoyable the comics are going to be. So that's my take on these. It works fairly decently in comics, especially 4, but 3 is just too much happening and not developing stuff enough. And the pacing, it's a mess. 3 is a mess. 4 is a lot better. Alright, then there is a single issue here for The Mighty Thor, issue 361, which is from 1985. This is the middle of a story arc, honestly. There is stuff happening beforehand, and this doesn't wrap everything up, so this is stuff happening afterwards. And so it's a little bit odd to just take this one comic and throw it in here without much context. So Thor is leading his band of Asgardian warriors into Hell. They are apparently looking for Odin as one thing, who has just died. And then secondly, Hela has just captured a bunch of Midgardians, Earthlings, mortals, who aren't supposed to be dead yet, and just claimed them for her own and taken them into the land of the dead. And so Thor is there to get the Midgardians released, so they can go back to their lives like they're supposed to be living, and not dead. So the land of the dead is kind of interesting to see, and it wasn't exactly what I expected, even from reading Norse mythology or some of the other Ragnarok stories. This one isn't actually Ragnarok, by the way, but it sort of works as an introduction to Hela, which is what I think they were going for when they threw it in this comic. Some weird stuff happens, like apparently there's a storyline with Hildy and Hogan, which I have no idea what's going on with that. It's just kind of randomly in there. Like, I'm sure it has purpose within the storyline, but reading them separately, I'm like, okay, this kid got a baseball cap. Whatever. Also, we get a really cool fight scene between Thor and Hela, which is exciting. So, this comic is strange to read without the context of the rest of the storyline, and I kind of want to go read that now. But at the same time, it's pretty decent for just throwing one old comic in here. And then the last comic that is in here is The Incredible Hulk 95. This is the 4th and I think final part of Planet Hulk Exile. So this comic finds the Hulk stranded on Sakaar. We also get to meet Krog and some of the other captives on Sakaar. So this one's really cool as an introduction to Ragnarok and finding out more about Sakaar because it just suddenly appears within the MCU. I also hadn't read any of the other Planet Hulk ones. This one does a pretty good job of setting up what's happening, so we're not too terribly confused, especially with this long recap going on in here. Lovely little few paragraphs, setting it up and being like, hey, this is what's going on with the Planet Hulk storyline. I thoroughly appreciated that. And it's really cool to see the Hulk kind of take over without Bruce Banner and have his own adventures. We also get a big gladiatorial fight happening, and who the Hulk ends up fighting is really exciting, and I enjoyed this one, but at the same time, because it's just off there by its own, it also feels incomplete. And I'm not sure if I want to go read the rest of the Planet Hulk stories, though, now that I know the ending of them. So it was kind of a weird choice to throw the last one in by itself. So, like I said, this one's kind of all over the place because it's basically 4 different comics that are trying to achieve 4 different things. The whole I gave it 3 stars. It's kind of meh, and it's kind of skip it. If you aren't super into the comics, you don't have to read this. Honestly, just go watch the movies. If you really wanted to know more about Hela, you would go back and read entire story arcs featuring Hela, rather than just one random comic. Or if you wanted to know more about Sakaar and the Planet Hulk, then you would go read the entire Planet Hulk storyline, rather than just having these random ones thrown in. So this comic kind of feels a lot like I don't know what they were doing, and I also couldn't help but think what I would have done instead and how I would have improved this, especially the Thor the Dark World Prelude 3. Like, I just wanted to rewrite that entire comic for them, honestly. Not my favorite. I really wanted this to be better than it actually was. I also hadn't read any of the other preludes, so I wasn't exactly sure what to expect going into this. I think in the future I'm not going to read the preludes, though. We'll just continue to keep skipping them and just rewatch the movies before going to see the next one. That's my thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if you've read this one or if you've read any of the other preludes, and how do you feel about them? What do you think about these? Do you enjoy the Planet Hulk storyline? Should I go read it? Or are there any really awesome Thor comics featuring Hela that should be read instead? So on the actual movie of Thor Ragnarok, I really enjoyed it. I totally recommend it. It is really funny and still emotional, and it feels like Thor and Loki in exactly what I want them to be. I am so excited, and I love it terribly. It's definitely my favorite MCU movie right now. I highly recommend it. I also enjoy Hela as a villain, and I really love Sakaar and the Hulk storyline. Everything about that movie is freaking perfect. I love it. So, if you want my opinion on whether or not to go see Ragnarok, I'm just going to throw that in this review and tell you to go watch that movie because it's amazing. Amazing. Especially if you love Thor, Loki, or the Hulk, or if you really love Asgard, or Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum. I also really love Valkyrie, and just all of it. Krog's funny. All of it works. It just works together seamlessly. So there's my opinion on the movies. Peace out. I love you guys, and keep reading. Bye. Also got my Loki's army shirt on. Also, Loki. There's Loki. Loki's my favorite, guys. That's why I read these. Honestly, I was hoping for more Loki.